Another social studies skill. This time, we're going to be taking a look at the anatomy of source based exams. How are they made? What are some of the elements that you'll see on them? Big thank you to Mr. Chris.Manderscheid, who is our social studies consultant and who provided us with this kind of blueprint so I can share it with you. So, how are source exams actually made? We're going to take a look at how they are made and then the different types of questions that you'll see on a source exam, because so many of our exams are source based, and they're source based because they are good exams. They test your knowledge, they test your skills, your processes, and everything in between. It's a really good way to test you. So, what is a source exam? Well, a source exam is a type of exam where the information is coming to you from a source. Now, that source could be a cartoon, it could be a graph, it could be speech bubbles, it could be a timeline, it could be absolutely anything. The information that you are taking is coming right from that source, which means you really need to know the ins and outs of your content. It's really, really important. And in a source based exam, there's usually 3 to 4 questions per source set. And usually that first question that you see is going to be a knowledge based type of question. So it should be pretty easy. There might be a question mark that you need to answer from one of the sources. The rest of the questions in that source set is combining the different sources together, trying to make some sort of inferences between sources, or even talking about all of the sources taken together. So when you're taking these exams, it's important that you read the sources, match them to what you already know from our content area. What have you been learning about? What do you already know? What is this source or set of sources actually talking about? I always like to underline key messages in sources. So, like this one, for example, this is a source of the voter turnout in Canadian federal elections. Well, we've talked about in chapter 1, we talk about voter turnout. I would underline that. That's a key message right there. I would try to find connections as well to other sources. What do all of these sources have in common? And then I would definitely read the questions that are underneath the sources to try and connect any key messages. As I'm working through, I would cross out, I would remove any of the options that do not make sense, any of the options that do not have anything to do with the sources. And every now and then, I would switch it up. I would read the questions before I even look at the sources. So you have to kind of get into a routine, develop some sort of habits on how you want to take these exams so that you can be as successful as possible. So what types of sources will we see on these exams? Well, we'll see lots of infographics, we'll see webs, and we'll see puzzles. These are really important on testing your knowledge and understanding. You'll see lots of question marks in these sources. You'll have to identify what the missing piece is in these types of questions. Another popular type of question are the perspectives of different speakers. So you'll have a pair of speakers and they will maybe agree with each other or they'll disagree with each other. And it might be linked to another source as well. And your job, usually when it comes to these types of questions, is identifying the issue that's being raised by those speakers. Timelines are a popular one as well. Oftentimes, this will be a knowledge-based question. There'll be a question mark. You'll have to identify the missing event that is there or a fact that's there. It could relate to information that deals with an overall concept of the sources. Compare them to the different sources, and you should see something that matches up. Speech bubbles, that's a popular one. They like using speech bubbles quite a bit. And usually in the speech bubbles, the person speaking is presenting some sort of fact. Maybe it could be a historical figure, somebody from our curriculum, and the person will say something in that speech bubble, and then you are going to have to identify what that's something actually means in terms of our content area. Another one that is really popular, and we do a lot of practice with these ones in class: political cartoons. What details in the source will illustrate or suggest something? An inference that can be drawn from the cartoon, something. They'll be giving you a cartoon, and basically, you are going to have to analyze what they are talking about or what the cartoonist is drawing. Maps are also popular. Okay, when you're working with a map, always take a look at the title. If there is one, or a legend for some information, you can pull a lot of information just from the title and the legend. And the questions around sources that have maps are going to be basically, what is the map about? That's always a common type of question. Hierarchies are next. How are these elements structured? Could be asking questions about responsibilities, powers, duties. This is very common when we're talking about Canadian government and our political system. This is a very common thing to use, are these hierarchies. This is done quite often. Next up, diagrams. Diagrams are popular. These are knowledge, testing for knowledge and understanding. Question marks, super common here. You'll have to identify what the missing check mark usually is. That's what they are going to be using diagrams for, as well as graphic organizers. They will do the same thing, testing for knowledge and understanding. There will be a question mark there asking you, what is that question mark supposed to be? What element is supposed to be there? What concept is supposed to be there? Idea. What from content area is supposed to be there? Lately, headlines have been really, really popular. Actually, not lately. They've always been popular. And it's going to ask you, maybe, it's possible, which headline is most directly related to the views or information of another source. So headlines are often used to compare the headlines to another source, or which pair of headlines are similar. So which ones are going to be similar to what the question might be asking about. So you have to take a look at all of them. Ignore the titles of the headlines, like what. So here we have like the Times or the Daily, the Herald, the Leader. That's not the important part. It's what the actual headlines are saying in these sources that are going to be important. Charts are always popular. We're looking for information, trying to pull information from the chart. When you're dealing with charts, just like with maps, look at the titles. Look at the titles for information. You'll be able to get a lot of information from the title. Like this one is all about voter turnout. That's what the question is going to be about. That's what's there. Data comparison. Okay, understanding of a key term is what we'll use data comparison for. Could be asking which statements are correct in the list that's there. These are testing your higher level thinking areas, right? What is the overall source trying to illustrate? These aren't the easiest questions. So usually these are going to be your higher level thinking questions. Learning and hearing and reading from excerpts is another popular one. So taking an article from a newspaper. The information here is coming from a reliable source. Usually this is done in an interview. Sometimes it's going to be asking, what is the overall message of this excerpt? What is the overall idea? So having your knowledge from content here is going to be really important. And then the last one that we like to see quite a bit is notes. So this is as if somebody were taking notes in a binder. They're writing down some key points, some facts, some figures and events and things like that. And they'll all be around some sort of central theme or some sort of question, and they will relate to other sources. So try and look at the bullet points when it comes to notes. What are they talking about? You'll see lots of dates oftentimes on these notes and names of particular events or legislation will be here. And you'll have to be pulling out the information there. Now, This is an opportunity for you. You can go online. We have all of the PAT, well, not all of the PATs, but there are a number of PATs that have been released where you can go and you can practice and take a look at some of these sources. And you'll start to see the more you practice, the more you attend class, you'll see that these sources tend to repeat themselves quite often. And you get into a pattern of writing these types of exams so that ultimately, the more you practice, the more you'll be successful at taking these types of exams. So I hope you enjoyed this social studies skill of the anatomy of source exams, and hopefully we'll be back soon with another video.